She let another man raise a toast mocking me in front of her entire firm. Everyone laughing, thinking I was nothing but the fool footing the bills, and none of them had a clue what I'd do next. If you're already hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment, because this story doesn't go where anyone expects that I've never been the guy who erupts in public. I don't break glasses, I don't shout, I don't make scenes. Maybe that's why I stood there frozen, a champagne flute in my hand, listening to my wife, laugh at a joke aimed straight at me. Not a belly laugh, not outright cruelty, but that soft, polite smile that said, "He shouldn't have said that, but I won't ruin the moment by correcting him." That smile burned more than the joke itself. It was my wife, Claire, who insisted I come to her firm's annual holiday gala this year. "It matters for my growth," she'd said, almost rehearsed. The ballroom they'd rented was the kind that pretended to be upscale. White tablecloths, dimmed chandeliers, a bar stocked with liquor just expensive enough to impress the interns but cheap enough not to bankrupt the partners. Everyone pretended not to be job hunting. Everyone pretended the place mattered more than it did. Corporate theater at its finest. I spotted Claire instantly, because she was glowing. She was laughing with a junior partner named Ryan Porter. 32, polished, Ivy League jawline, the kind of man who looked like life hadn't just been kind to him. It had probably apologized whenever it inconvenienced him. They were standing too close. Not obscenely close, just close enough to make a husband wonder. Still, I'm not the jealous type. Or at least, I wasn't. When Claire saw me approaching, her expression flickered. Something like irritation, or guilt, or fear of what I represented. It disappeared so quickly I couldn't decipher it. She introduced me to a small crowd, all polite hellos and empty smiles. Ryan reached out with that professional grip handshake men like him perfect in college fraternities. "Your wife talks about you all the time," he said. "Funny," I replied, matching his shake. "She barely mentions you." His smile twitched. "Good." The evening dragged. Speeches, inside jokes, awards for people who were already updating their resumes. I drifted through it quietly, nursing a beer, watching Claire float from conversation to conversation like this room was where she truly lived and I was just visiting. I remembered when I used to admire that about her. Then came the toasts. The managing partner spoke. A few associates followed. Then Ryan, cheeks flushed, confidence high, ego fully inflated, stepped forward and lifted his glass. "To the associates who really built this firm this year," he said, his voice loud enough to hush the room. "And to the people who understand what sacrifice looks like." He turned to Claire, looked right at her, then past her, locking eyes with me. "And here's to the husbands back home who pay the bills while we take their wives to success." Laughter crashed through the ballroom. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to sting. Enough to make me feel the room suddenly shrink around me. Claire didn't laugh, but she smiled, small, controlled, diplomatic. She didn't defend me. She didn't correct him. She didn't take my hand or step closer. She just let it hang there. I set my beer down on the nearest table. The sound was sharp, louder than I intended. A few people glanced over. I looked at my wife, waiting for something, anything, a roll of the eyes, a grimace, a whisper of apology, a sign that she understood what had just happened. She couldn't even meet my gaze. And that was it. No yelling, no scene, no heroic confrontation. I simply turned and walked out of the ballroom, past the fake smiles and the bad jazz band and the too bright lights. The December air hit me like truth. Cold but clean. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, engine running, letting the silence finally say what I'd been too patient to admit. The late nights, the weekend work trips, the way she described me to her colleagues like I was some background character in her life. It all connected. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. The only sound was the tires on the asphalt and something inside me settling into place. Steady, cold, resolved. By the time I walked through my front door, one thing was crystal clear. Claire wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets, and I wasn't the man this firm or Ryan thought I was. The next morning didn't feel like any other morning. There was no fog of doubt, no second-guessing. Just clarity, sharp enough to cut through every excuse I'd been handing Claire for years. I woke early, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop right at the kitchen table. Claire's tablet was charging on the counter. She'd never bothered with a passcode. Why would she? I was the supportive husband who stayed in the background, who didn't pry, who didn't know enough to question anything. So I picked it up and started scrolling. Her messages with Ryan went back 8 months. 8 months of slow, intentional erosion. It started with work chatter, late-night case updates, innocent things, then shifted. Complaints about home, inside jokes, comments that lingered too long, and then the real lines crossed. He doesn't get it. Maybe it's easier when he's not paying attention. You have no idea how much I look forward to talking to you. Screenshot. Screenshot. Another. The context told the story plainly, even if nothing explicit was written. A person doesn't smile like she smiled at that gala for a man she only talks cases with. I placed the tablet back exactly where it had been. No trace. When she came downstairs, already dressed, polished, every hair in place, she barely looked at me. I've got to go into the office. Big case Monday. She said it breezily like yesterday never happened. On a Saturday, I said, not accusing, just observing. That's how careers work, she replied, grabbing her purse. Will you be here when I get back? Where else would I go? She hesitated at that. There was something in my tone she didn't recognize. She left moments later, but she didn't go to the office. Not according to the location tracker tied to our phone plan. She drove straight toward Ryan's neighborhood. And that was all I needed to know. I spent the next hour on the phone with Richard, my longtime attorney. I need a divorce lawyer, I told him. He didn't ask why. He just listened, gave me a name, Laura Bennett, a specialist with a reputation for precision, and told me he'd alert her to expect my call. Then I phoned Greg, my operations manager. Reliable to the bone, loyal in a way Claire had forgotten how to be. I need you to run an audit, I said. Every invoice, every hour billed, every point of contact we've had with the law firm Claire works for. Quietly. Greg didn't question it. I'll have it by tomorrow night. While the world outside my windows moved lazily through its Saturday, I built the scaffolding of a new life. Calm, deliberate, methodical. Around noon, Richard called back with early findings on my contracts. Numbers, clauses, renewal terms. My company wasn't some side gig the firm handled out of kindness. It was a major vein of revenue they depended on. That alone made the events of last night feel different. I'd been laughed at by a man who had no idea who he was mocking. Claire came home after 3. She looked relaxed, like she'd spent the early afternoon somewhere warm, comfortable, familiar. How was the office? I asked. She blinked, stiffened. Fine. Productive. I nodded slowly, letting the lie float between us. I found some interesting things to read while you were gone. Her purse slipped from her shoulder and hit the table harder than she intended. What does that mean? Work things, I said casually. Meetings Monday. Don't worry about it. And I walked past her, giving her nothing else. The rest of the weekend stretched thin with tension. She kept probing gently, trying to measure my thoughts, my tone, my posture. I stayed polite, distant, and unreachable. Sunday afternoon, she finally stepped into my doorway, arms crossed tight. Are you upset about Friday? Ryan's toast, I said, eyes still on my laptop. She shifted her weight. It was just a joke. He'd been drinking. Was it funny? That's not the point. It is for me. I finally looked at her. Because you didn't defend me. Not with a look, not with a word, not with anything. Color crept into her face, but she said nothing. I've got work to finish, I said calmly. We'll talk another time. She walked away, but she wasn't calm anymore. I heard her whispering on the phone later, voice low, emotional. Maybe she was confiding in a friend, maybe in Ryan. At this point, it didn't matter. Monday morning arrived crisp and unassuming, as if it didn't know the world had shifted under my feet. I dressed in my best suit, left before Claire woke, and drove straight to her firm. Not for her, but for the two senior partners who actually controlled the place. I'd scheduled a meeting early enough that no one would expect it. The receptionist blinked when she saw me, surprised, maybe even a bit intimidated. She sent me upstairs. The partners were already waiting, serious, attentive. Gentlemen, I said, shaking their hands, we need to talk about something that happened at your holiday event. And just like that, the wheel began to turn. The moment I walked out of that boardroom, everything that followed moved like a storm I'd already learned to navigate. Decisions were made behind closed doors. Whispers traveled faster than truth. And by mid-morning, the firm that had laughed at me 2 nights earlier was scrambling to understand who I really was. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I drove straight to my office, the suit still crisp on my shoulders, my mind sharper than it had felt in years. My phone vibrated nonstop. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Texts from Claire. Messages that stacked up like panicked confessions. I ignored everyone. I'd spent too long listening to the wrong people. Greg met me at the door, coffee in hand, eyes wide with a mix of confusion and admiration. Your wife called, he said quietly. 6 times. I nodded. I'm unavailable. He didn't question it. For the first time in a long time, my boundaries weren't optional. 8915. My personal phone buzzed again. What did you do? Ryan just got fired. Everyone's looking at me. Another text. Please call me. This is humiliating. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so predictable. Humiliation mattered to her when it landed on her doorstep. When it landed on mine, it was just a joke. I let the screen go dark. By the time early afternoon settled in, the papers were ready. Laura Bennett, firm and efficient, confirmed everything. Where would you like her served? She asked. I didn't hesitate. At her office. There was silence on the line. That will be public. She had no problem letting me be publicly mocked, I said. She'll understand. Laura didn't pry. She simply arranged it. 2 o'clock sharp. While the clock ticked closer, I worked. Real work. The kind that built a company and put food on a lot of tables besides my own. My ability to function that day surprised even me. There was a steadiness settling across my shoulders, a certainty that didn't crack. At 2:15, my phone finally erupted. Calls, texts, voicemails pouring in like a broken dam. I didn't listen to any of them. I didn't need to. The process server had done his job.at4. I drove back to my temporary rental. I didn't expect Claire to be waiting, but there she was, standing beside her car, eyes red, work clothes wrinkled from hours of pacing. Where have you been? She asked the second I opened the door. I've been trying to reach you. Meetings, I said, brushing past her. Don't do that, Michael. Don't dismiss me. She followed me inside. What did you do? Why did they fire him? Why did you humiliate me? I turned slowly. Humiliation only matters to you now because you feel it. Not when it happened to me. Not when you let him mock me while you smiled. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she changed tactics. Those messages, if you saw them, they weren't what you think. It wasn't physical. So you were faithful, I said. Just disrespectful. She flinched. It was emotional confusion. Support. You don't understand what work is like for me. Then maybe, I said quietly, you should have married your co-workers. Her tears came fast, messy, real. But tears don't erase choices. When I told her she'd be served again tomorrow with asset filings, something in her snapped. I'll fight everything. The prenup, the house, all of it. Fight, I said calmly. Spend every dollar you have. Hire the whole state if you want. It won't change the outcome. Her face drained of color when I reminded her what she actually brought into the marriage. She whispered something about Ryan helping her, and I almost laughed. He's unemployed, Claire, and your firm's not protecting either of you anymore. I packed a bag that night while she stood in the doorway crying quietly, trying to negotiate with a man she no longer understood. I left without looking back. The hotel room was nothing special, clean, quiet, but stepping into it felt like stepping into oxygen. The weeks that followed built a new rhythm. Meetings, contracts, growth. A house I leased, furnished simply but intentionally. The divorce moved through the system cleanly. The prenup held. Claire hired an attorney who tried to rattle sabers but never had a weapon that mattered. Ryan couldn't find new work. His reputation carried its own shadow. Claire left her firm. No goodbye party. No glowing email announcement. Just a quiet resignation and a smaller job across town. Life rearranged itself around consequences. On the day of the final hearing, the judge took 15 minutes to end what had taken years to corrode. Walking out of the courthouse felt like stepping through a door that had been locked from the inside. Laura shook my hand, satisfied. It's done, she said. And for the first time, it really was. I moved into my new home the next morning. 3 bedrooms, simple yard, sunlight streaming through windows that finally belonged to me alone. Work thrived. My team thrived. And I thrived. Not loudly, not theatrically. Just steadily, confidently, on my own terms. One evening at a networking event, I saw Preston, one of the partners. He thanked me quietly for pushing their firm to clean house. I nodded politely. It was never about revenge. It was about respect. Across the room, I spotted Claire. She looked older somehow, tired, worn down by a life she'd once bragged about. Our eyes met briefly. No anger, no guilt, no spark. Just 2 people who no longer shared anything. I nodded once and walked away. A clean, quiet ending. That night, in my own kitchen, I cooked a simple meal, listening to nothing but the steady hum of a house that wasn't filled with tension anymore. My phone sat silent on the counter. No crises, no apologies, no demands. Peace has a sound, and I finally heard it. And I learned something along the way. Respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you enforce. And when someone shows you they can't give it, the strongest thing you can do is walk away and build a life with people who already understand your value. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next one.